Welcome to the POSTCAST. I'm joined by Kevin Pelton rather than Ron Boone, as Ron Boone did TV, and Kevin had to experience this one rather than Ron. Well, Ron had to experience it too. 120-114 loss. The bottom line is here, the Jazz could not come out with much of any energy tonight. They didn't come out with a lot of pizzazz. The Blazers, on the other hand, at home, trying to earn minutes, came out and played very, very hard. A Jazz fan should be how worried about that performance?
I think I would pretty much throw this away. You know, you'd probably do that with one bad performance even during the regular season, but especially during the preseason here. You know, I think what you mentioned during the game, that it stands out because of the fact that we're used to Utah playing so hard every night that when they don't for one night, it really looks very different than everything else.
Kevin Pelton is the author of the book Basketball Prospectus. I strongly urge you to go get it at basketballprospectus.com, and by the time you watch this, it might be up at Amazon. It's about a little under $10, and you can get it as a PDF, and it's really fabulous. One of the unique things in it is the Shaney projection system that is exclusive just to Kevin. Now, with that said, Kevin and I will do podcasts throughout the year. We'll do some Mythbusters. We'll do those things. They're highly regarded. I hear that. But let's just take this moment with you, considering we're going to take this 120-114 game and throw it generally out of the window and talk about the Jazz as a whole. And let's start with Enes Kanter. He did have a good night. You saw him tonight. He's clearly a different player. He looks different physically, and his game is so much more wide-ranging. What is your thoughts on what you saw?
Yeah, he made 3 or 4 maybe plays even just in the first half that there's no way he could have physically made last season that are probably primarily due to the transformation he's made with his body and then also the increased confidence he's playing with this season. And that's what you really want to see with a young guy. You're going to make mistakes as a rookie. That's inevitable, but it's how you progress and how you adjust, and we're seeing that from him this year.
You're pretty high on the Favors fan level. Sometimes you and I argue over who can be higher. What is your thoughts on what you saw to Derek? He's been a little bit of a struggling offensively at times. We saw some of that, but then he regained it a little bit in the second half. What were your thoughts on what you saw to Derek tonight, and what you would expect out of Derek this season?
Yeah, I think the opportunity to play a little more in the second half after Paul Millsap went down was probably a positive for him because he developed a little more confidence offensively. And you see him trying a few new things in terms of hitting that 15-footer, which, you know, it looks like maybe at some point he's going to be able to knock down. He hasn't been able so far during the preseason. But this is another solid step forward for him. We saw him make major leaps from year 1 to year 2, and I don't know if we can expect that same level of development this season, but it's a year for him to continue that process and build on what he's done.
Paul Millsap doesn't look quite right in the preseason yet. I'm at the point where I've stopped worrying about anything in regards to Paul. He's such a warrior and such a gamer. Is there anything in your projection system that says the undersized power forward falls off the table at a certain age, or there's no reason to worry considering Paul's track record for success?
I don't think he's quite there yet, especially because of the fact that he has the ability that he can drop off a little bit from last year. He's probably going to because that was a career year in many ways. But he can do that and still be an above-average starter in this league.
Rather than individuals, what's your thought, big picture on this roster, the way it lays out, and what you know of the Jazz? Not what you saw tonight. Wipe that out, but what you know of the Jazz.
You know, it's a team with solid depth in both the front court and the back court now. Improved shooting, we did see that play out in terms of Randy Foye, Mo Williams, Marvin Williams stretching the defense and give you a different dimension than we saw last year from the Jazz. So I think this is a team that is, you know, more likely than not certainly to make the playoffs and right in the mix for one of those last 3 seeds in the West, which are going to be very competitive.
Now, you look at Marvin Williams, who you've looked at in Atlanta, and the best line I heard Tyrone Corbin said today was, you know, if we go strong side to weak side, Marvin really becomes a real weapon to us on the weak side. And I said to someone, well, that's not that different than how Atlanta used him. And they said, yeah, but they never went weak side. And when you saw how you know Marvin Williams well back from his high school days in Bremerton, and you've watched him play in Atlanta, and he's been the disappointment per se. What did you see out of the way the Jazz use him that leads you to believe he will either have similar, less, or the same results as he had in Atlanta?
Well, I think that's part one, like you talked about, rotating the basketball for open looks. You know, he started to get more of those last year when they had more ball movement, but in previous years, not as many. Number 2 is we saw him post up, which is not something Atlanta tried to do with him, and that's really a core part of who Utah is a franchise and an organization, posting guys up, even small forwards. And then I think the third thing is just giving him the confidence to go out there and play. I think he took some shots tonight that he would not have taken last season in Atlanta.
Final thing is the number one conversation amongst Jazz fans, the log jam of bigs. We talked about it a little bit at the end of our broadcast. You shared that the baseline that you use in your projections at Basketball Prospectus is every player in the NBA will miss, on average, 6 games. that would mean even with the logjam, the Jazz have 18 games this year where they likely don't have all of those, all of their bigs. What's your thought on what the Jazz should do with that logjam?
And even possibly 24 when you look at adding Cantor into
right.
that as well. So, I think that probably it's going to resolve itself at some point. And it could be next summer, but I think the question is, if you have a sense of what's going to happen next summer in terms of making a choice between Jefferson and Millsap, how do you then use that information to potentially make a move later on the season if it gives you the opportunity to fill another need?
All right, well, it's great to have you, but the real guy has come up here, so I'm just going to have him put on the headset and sit down and get his quick thoughts and then let him get out of here. I'm just being dismissed. You worked that hard. I'm just dismissing you with no love at all. Because Ron Boone is back. This is the first ever postcast with both. We're going to have to do this quickly. You're lucky, Ron, because I don't have enough time to download everything and make the bus. Thank you very much for walking up here. I'll ask you the same question I asked Kevin. Do you take this? Do you worry about this one at all? They were just so terrible for the first half of this game, allowing 70 points, or you just say whatever?
I don't think you worry about it. I really think that the Portland Trail Blazers was just hot. They made everything, the three-point shots.
He just ran up a flight of stairs, by the way.
And yeah, a little winded here, but
pretty good shape.
I think you learned something though, that the transition defense is not there yet, and so you just go back to the drawing board.
Okay, the big question, the number one question that I have, I think most Jazz fans have, is can Millsap and Jefferson defend well enough as a tandem for this basketball team? Did tonight? An easy answer saying they gave up 41 points in the first quarter. They can't do it. Is that too simplistic?
Well, it's not, and it's. I think it's a concern because if they're going to play this up-tempo style of play here, and then transition defense is going to be very, very important. Can they get back and help defend? You see what Cantor does. Cantor gets back. Cantor scores a lot of points. He gets rebounds in a short period of time. We haven't seen that at Al Jefferson yet, so that's going to be very important. This is going to be addressed, I'm sure. For the rest of the preseason.
How do you like Favors' crossover move in the left block?
That was one of the best moves I've seen him make all year. I mean, last year as well. I mean, he backed up and then crossed over and goes underneath. And that's the type of play that you like to see out of him.
Yeah.
And he needs to bring it.
I mean, Cantor did it again tonight.
He's going to do it, David. You can anytime you can see the improvement in someone, that tells you that they work very, very hard. He gives everything he has. He leaves it out there on the floor. And you have to love that. And again, what did he end up with? 12 points?
No, more than that. 18.
18 points, and he gets those in such a short period of time. He was only out there
23 minutes.
23 minutes. I mean, that's awesome. Coaches love that kind of play.
The geek joined us, and then the player, and that's your postcast.